Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1985 biographical drama titled Mask. Now, Mask runs for 1 hour and 59 minutes long. It is directed by Peter Bogdanovich. It is produced by Martin Strager, Starger, I should say. Uh, the script was written by Anna Hamilton Phelan. The score was done by Denis Ricotta. The cinematography by Laszlo Kovacs. And the editing was done by Barbara Ford. And the stars of the movie are Cher, Sam Elliott, Eric Stoltz, Estelle Getty, Richard Dysart, Laura Dern, Harry Carey Jr., Dennis Burkley, Lawrence Monoson, Ben Piazza, and Kelly Jo Minter. Oh boy, oh boy. This is probably maybe one of the hardest movie reviews that I've ever had the honors of reviewing. Not to say that the movie was bad, far from it. In fact, it's probably, maybe in my opinion, maybe one of the best movies I have ever seen. The reason why I'm saying that it's a hard movie to watch is because it is not a feel good movie in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that it's very, very hard to watch and you just feel very, very uncomfortable the whole time through because let's face it, this movie is just one of the saddest movies you'll ever see. And you know what? If it could even draw some of the toughest people to tears, then Peter Bogdanovich did his job right. This movie will truly make you want to go near a Kleenex box. This is not a sit down, feel good popcorn movie. It might sometimes feel a bit like a TV movie per se, even though it scored very well in the box office. It received a ton of positive reviews from the critics, including some of the more harder critics like Roger Ebert and Siskel, who both gave it a two thumbs up because this movie not only is an emotional tearjerker, this movie gets you very, very involved. I think it's just the storytelling is just spot on excellent. You have very, very sympathetic characters that you could truly, truly care for. And there really isn't any antagonists in this story, which is really good. I mean, and the story is told out of just pure realism that the world we live in is not always good to everyone. Even if you're good to even if you're the nicest person in the world, life sometimes does suck. Now, I'm not trying to be cynical, and I'm not trying to encourage people to do things they shouldn't do, and I don't want you to do anything that you would end up regretting to do later on. I don't encourage anybody. All I'm just saying is that it doesn't matter whether you're good or bad, life could still life is still not fair. And that could be the case in this biological drama titled Mask, which is pretty much what you would call the Rocky Dennis story. Now, although it is built as a biopic, I don't really quite see it as a biopic because when I think of a biopic, I'm thinking of, you know, Rocky Dennis from his childbirth up until his misfortunate death. Here, they're only just sort of chronicling the later stages of his life. Um, and the stuff that he has to endure. He is born with some rare disease called, I'm probably going to butcher the name of the disease, craniophysial dysplasia. Or they also call it, I think they call it lionism, is what he suffers from. And this is a very rare disease, but it does have extreme dire consequences. It means that the patient will have a very, very inflated head, and the life expectancy towards most people who suffer from this illness is very short. But Rocky Dennis had to live with this illness since he was small. Since he was born practically. He was born with this illness. Maybe it didn't start during his infancy. This condition worsened by the time he was a toddler, like around 4 or 5 years old. That's when they started to notice his condition. It's easy to point out that this story is based on actual events once the cameras start rolling. But it's also backed up by excellent performances by Cher and Eric Stoltz. And by God, these guys delivered. I think this is truly one of Cher's best performances in a film that doesn't really get too much attention. I mean, when you look at the user reviews on IMDb, there's only like 92 people who wrote a review on it, including me. And by God, this movie is like really, really well executed. We watch Rocky through his stages, and we just want to be in this guy's life. We really do. He seems like a pretty cool guy. I mean, in spite of the fact that he was born with this birth defect, he's like truly a person you would want to be friends with. Who wouldn't want to be friends with this guy? It doesn't matter whether he was born with a birth defect. This guy had a heart. This guy had managed to break the ridicule code. Of course, onlookers are going to stare at him because of his birth defect, and there will be obnoxious people who will taunt at him and say he looks like a Frankenstein monster. And And when people do that, he just holds his head up and retorts back with a witty catchphrase and not let it bother him. And the guy actually managed to break the code from being ridiculed to respect it because of the fact that the guy not only is witty and humorous, he is also quite a brilliant academic in school. I mean, from the opening scenes, we see the school principal where he's going to recommending his mother to send him to a special school. But his mother threatened to sue the school if he doesn't get accepted. So eventually he was accepted in this school. The problems in this movie do not only just stem from Rocky Dennis. Yes, he goes through a lot of problems, not just the physical frequent headaches and the heartbreak, but and the recurring pain that he suffers from quite a lot. He also suffers a lot of emotional problems too, which I'll probably like to get at. But this movie might be a lot about Rocky Dennis, but a lot of this movie too centers a lot on his mother, Rusty Dennis, too, who also seems to go through problems as well. I mean, they live in some small town in California, pretty much a working class area. She's a hot wheeling mother. She spends a lot of her time hanging out with a ragtag group of bikers called the Turks, who are, big, burly, intimidating individuals. But they also kind of, but, they also seem to be very dynamic. They're not just, one dimensional biker guys. They seem to come across as being extremely sympathetic. You know, sure, they might probably be misfits in society, but they seem to be like, they seem to sometimes treat Rocky almost as though as if it was like an extended family of his. Dozer, the guy has a speech impediment who hardly talks, he's like a brother to Rocky. And then you have Gar. Gar is kind of almost like a father figure to him. Gar is actually might be inspired by a real person named Ben Toulis, who would go on to marry Florence Steinberg, aka Rusty Dennis. And let's see, there was also another. There were a few other ones too. Red, played by Harry Carey Jr., an old guy. He was probably kind of almost like a grandfather figure to Rocky. And they also seem to have this kind of sympathetic thing going for them. I so this movie, you don't always have to entirely feel sorry for Rocky. I mean, Rocky is a very level-headed individual. and he's capable of making the decisions that he makes on his own. He seems to function quite well in society, and he doesn't always let this deformity that he has get the better of him. He seems to be well respected by the students at his school, and those who taunt him, instead of, like using aggression or just to tell them to fuck off, he would just get them back by saying something witty or to put some kind of humor into it. And there is a little bit of humor in this movie. I mean, it's not all entirely put you to tears. Yes, 70% of this movie is a tearjerker, but there are some small moments of humor. Some of it comes from Cher's performance, and some of it comes from Eric Stoltz's performance. So, it's not every scene will put you to tears. A lot of it will, but the moments that will make you laugh, just enjoy those kind of moments and not let the tears get the better of you. If you don't like movies that'll make you cry, or just simply don't watch the movie if it's gonna make you cry, because yes, there is gonna be moments in this movie where you just feel so bad for Rocky that you're left with no choice but to leave you in tears. And there are a lot of stuff in this movie that will make you cry. But then just, take deep breaths and just say to yourself, it's only a movie. Once the movie is over, I suggest you go watch a Three Stooges movie, find something to laugh about, and before you know it, you'll be happy again. Or just go out, get yourself a nice ice cream sundae or something, come back home, and you'll feel happy again. If this movie really makes you depressed. So this is actually what I wrote. Mask is a tender, heartwarming story of a young teenager named Rocky Dennis, played by Eric Stoltz, who is a very intelligent individual, but he's also emotionally sensitive. However, he is scarred badly due to a rare disease that has disfigured his face since he was born. As always, people who pass him by or approach him at first glance feel slightly intimidated by his deformity. But by not letting these fears get to him, he becomes well over with his peers as they learn to accept him for who he is, not by what he looks like. Yes, it goes to show you this movie has that kind of passage that no matter how you look on the outside, it's what's inside that counts. I mean, you could be the most handsomest individual in the world or the prettiest girl in the world, but if you're mean spirited, insincere, or inconsiderate, all that stuff that's on the outside is just a hyperbole. You could still be nice looking, you could still be handsome, but you also have to have heart. If you don't have heart, then metaphorically, you're the one who's ugly. Rocky always seems to get a boost of confidence from his mother, Rusty Dennis, played by Cher, who is played with sheer excellence. Rusty is a gorgeous single mother, And she's got problems of her own, too. She spends most of her time hanging around with biker gangs. She drinks, she smokes, she's addicted to drugs. She's also at times a bit self absorbed and sometimes even passive aggressive towards Rocky's needs and wants. I mean, who could forget the time when Rocky felt bad because he will never get a girlfriend because of his deformity? So, what does Rusty do? She goes out, she goes downtown Los Angeles, and what does she do? She sends home a prostitute to satisfy his needs. And of course, this does not sit well for Rocky at all. Does Rocky ever find true love? He tries. We'll give him credit for that. He tries. I mean, um, the school principal, Mr. Sims, the guy who recommended that Rocky should attend special school, actually knew that Rocky actually was very coherent, and being that he was a great academic at school, he recommended that why doesn't he take a job at a camp for the blind? And while at that camp for the blind, he meets a very pretty blind girl by the name of Diana Adams, played by Laura Dern, a very young Laura Dern, by the way. And even though there was really no romantic entanglements, they seemed to have got along quite well. He introduced her to, even though she doesn't know what colors look like. I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, she's blind. She doesn't know what blue is or what green is or what red is. So instead, he says that even though you can't see colors, you could try and feel colors. So he takes her to a kitchen, and he shows her what what blue, the color blue, feels like. So he takes a rock from a freezer and puts it in her hands, and he tells her, "See, that's blue. And now I'm going to show you what red feels like." So he takes a rock that he put in a cooking pot. At first I thought maybe it was a potato. He puts it in her hand and it burns her. And he says, "See that? That's red." Okay. And then when you blow on it, that's pink. And then he shows her billowy. So he makes her touch cotton. That's billowy. And they seem to get along very well. She's got a love for horses, and he finds her attractive. And I was hoping that there would be some more further romance between her and Rocky. And maybe I'll try to go on a little bit later as to explain all the things that went wrong with Rocky Dennis, that is. Because I'm going to tell you something. In the first half of the movie, we're so proud of him because the guy won a lot of academic awards in his school, especially in history, math, and sciences, where he was really excelling in. I loved it when he was talking about, how the whole Trojan War started. I mean, he gave a great explanation, about some kind of like a beauty contest, and that somebody named Paris was not eligible to join to take part. So then, as an act of retribution, they brought in this Trojan horse, and when they opened the Trojan horse, the army came out, and then everything went. And that was kind of like he explained it better than what I did, but you kind of get the idea. I mean, he when he presented that in class, everybody was impressed. I mean, there are a lot of great, memorable scenes. The thing about Rusty Dennis that I kind of liked about her is that, in spite of her problems, she continues to stick out for her son, and she will definitely bend over backwards to defend him from anyone who puts him to a lesser degree. Like, for example, when the school principal, who recommended that her deformed son be placed in a special school, and how she told him off to his face that he will thrive with the normal students and threatened to sue him, shows that her love for her son will always be first before her. Or like when she tries to bring her boyfriend home, and when she feels that when Rocky is like suffering from one of his headaches, she was there to comfort him. But with his progress and his strong academic showings, Rocky graduates as a valedictorian of his class. Or at least he should have. Ever since he was born, Rusty delivered tough love for her son. Not to the point where he'll suffer a nervous breakdown, but just as a way to keep him motivated and to blend in with people his own age, like as though he was a normal child without taking advantage of his deformity. And Rocky continued that legacy from the morning he wakes up to face the world, inflate his self confidence, keeping the glass half full, and just be happy with the world around him in what little time he has on this earth. And eventually, through tiring persuasion to get his mother to clean up her act, the audience truly can find more ways to love Rocky for what he really is. You love him because Rocky is a kid who loves people back, which to this day is a precious commodity that you rarely see these days. Rocky is just a guy who's just full of life. He is the kind of guy who will bend over backwards for you. Yes, I know when it comes to tutoring, he doesn't do it for free. He doesn't do it at an expensive price, but he doesn't do it gratis. But still, I think his love and affection does not come at a price. You feel good for him when he accomplishes a lot of things. And you're always there for him throughout everything, good or bad. Now, I don't have a problem with the movie that it depicts a lot of realism, but there is a lot of sadness in this movie that's just sometimes hard to sit through. Yes, the narrative is told effectively, but I've often feel a lot of sadness and a lot of angst because a lot of things in this movie, especially near the end, the unhappy endings that come from him start crashing down like right away. I mean, one minute we're all happy that he won all these academic achievement awards, and we're all happy that he's excelling well in school, and we're all happy when he finally meets a girl who loves him back, no matter how he looks, even though she's blind. But there's also a lot of things in this movie that will make you cry. And if it does make you cry, then like I said earlier, Peter Bogdanovich is doing his job right. Even though you don't want to cry, there are moments in this movie that will truly make you sad. Not just Rocky's deformity, but also a lot of the things that he had got taken away from him. What were they? I'll name you 5 things. Number 1, he and his best friend Ben were planning on motorbiking all over Europe. But that plan was thrown away because Ben was moving to Michigan and he wasn't coming back. And of course, that frustrated Rocky very badly, over to the point where he just kept telling Ben, "You're stupid. That's what you are. You're stupid." I mean, I'm not saying that Ben was a jerk because of him not telling Rocky that, that he was moving back to Michigan with his father. You feel bad for Rocky because he had this plan that he and Ben were gonna motorbike all across Europe, and he had all these thumbtacks pinned to the wall of all these places in Europe that he was planning on going. But all of that completely expunged. Other things. He tried to get his mother into rehab, but she said no, no, no. Yes, in some ways, Rusty Dennis was the 70s, 80s version of Amy Winehouse. Even though she tried to be legit, but unfortunately she must have relapsed back into her old ways. Other things. He tried to keep in contact with Diane. I mean, she gave him his phone number to call him back. But every time he tried to call Diane, her parents kept saying she wasn't home or she was busy. One time he actually boldly asked her, "Did you tell her that I was calling?" So instead he ends up taking all these bus rides to San Marino, California at a ranch where she, I guess, worked. And he was hoping that maybe they could ride off into the sunset on a horse. He tried to ask her, "Are you? Does your? Are you? Did you know that I was calling?" Of course, she realized that her parents did not want her to go anywhere near him because of his deformity. He tried to call her, but her parents won't let her talk to him or go anywhere near him. And then she also has this heartbreaking news saying that she's been enrolled in a private school for the blind and that he can't come with her. So there's another thing that there's another thing that didn't that hurt his feelings. I'm okay. I'm okay. And then there is also a scene where one of the biker gang members named Red passes away, and Rocky says he's not fully dead. He's everywhere. You know, some of his quotes that he says in this movie is just like fully poetic. It really truly is. It's one of the most poetic. If there's any movie that has a lot of poetic stuff that will tug at your heartstrings, this movie truly is it. And then, um, of course, because of all this bad luck that has been brewing with him, um, after he graduates from, I guess, junior high, he gets enrolled into another high school, and all his friends from the junior high school where he went, they went elsewhere, and and there was this scene where we see a change a bit in Rocky as he went from being this carefree, fun-loving guy. We progressively see a much more embittered, angered individual, because there was these one person at the lockers who was taunting him, saying, "Oh, jeez, why doesn't he take off the mask?" But instead of using some kind of a witty or a humorous comeback, he aggressively pushes him in the locker and he says, "I'll take off my mask if you take off yours, you son of a bitch." And he storms off. And I was like, what? Whatever happened to the carefree, fun loving Rocky Dennis? Now he's an angered shell of his former self, an embittered, angry person. And, who can blame him? I mean, his best friend betrayed him. His girlfriend's parents don't want him near it. His girlfriend's parents don't want him near him. He goes to a new school. None of his old friends are there. And the students are not really all that receptive towards him. His mother has gone back to her drinking and smoking and AA again. his plans of going to Europe are completely expunged. So who can blame this poor guy for being embittered and angered? And then, of course, the worst scene happened. While Rusty and her biker gang are having a little get together or something, Rocky says that he needs to turn in early because he's suffering from a really terrible headache, worse than ever. So then, she says, "Okay, Rocky, I'll take these bums home. You just go in your bed and get some rest, okay?" So then, before he goes to sleep, he takes all the thumbtacks off the map of Europe and he goes to sleep. His mother checks on him one more time. And then I guess she goes out with the biker gangs or goes gallivanting. And she doesn't come home until the next morning. So by next morning, she comes home and the phone rings. It's the school principal. She thinks that maybe Rocky went to school because today was the day he was supposed to take a Spanish quiz. But the principal said he never showed up. So she was like, "Well, that's strange." And she's like, "Well, okay. I'll talk to him." So when she goes into his bedroom, she notices he's still asleep. So she goes on and checks on him. She says, "Hey, come on. Rise and shine. You're not going to let a little Spanish exam intimidate you. Hey, come on. Rocky, wake up. Wake up. Oh my God, you're cold. Oh. Here, put some blankets on you." So then she goes and she checks his pulse to see if he's breathing. Only thing is he's not breathing. Rocky's dead. So then she goes into the kitchen, knocks over a few things, and breaks down into an emotional outburst. And then we cut to the final scenes where Rusty, Gar, and Dozer are at his graveyard. And they start putting baseball cards of the 1955 Brooklyn Dodgers on there. And then Rusty recites a poem that Rocky wrote in English class. And that's how the movie ends. Now, I have seen Mask many times. And every time I watch this movie, tissue paper is never behind. It is truly a coming-of-age story that deals with triumphs and failures of having an incurable disease, and it's handled in a believable and sensitive approach. But the great center of the story is not entirely centered on the kid's physical illness, but the true bonding between a mother and a son. Now let me try and see if I know this is going to be a long review, but I'm going to sort of like get into the characters because there's a lot of great character development. Some of the characters in there. Let's take a look here. I mean, I know I've discussed a lot about Rusty, Dennis, and Rocky, but I also want to go through some of the supporting characters here too. Sam Elliott, my God, he was quite excellent as Gar. I mean, here we see, here we see a guy who's a biker. He seems to be this uber masculine guy. And even though he might be tough and intimidating, this guy truly has a heart of gold. He's the kind of guy who you don't piss him off, but if you don't piss him off, he'll probably offer you a complimentary beer. That's the kind of guy he is. He is a real man's man. Alright, let's take a look here. There's a lot of other great supporting cast members. Let's see, we have Estelle Getty from the Golden Girls. In this movie, she makes you forget about Sophia Petrullo. Here, Estelle Getty, she plays Mrs. Toulis. That's Rusty Dennis's mother, Rocky's grandmother. She plays off a much more level-headed character than her character Sophia from the Golden Girls, the spin-off show, which was the Golden Palace. And then she also became a regular cast member on the TV series Empty Nest. This role, she actually plays it off as, tries to keep a level head on. She knows that her and her relationship with her daughter is not the greatest, but she many times tries to tell Abe, now Abe, don't start, okay? Okay, we've came here in peace, and let's try. She tries her best to stay as level-headed as she can. She definitely truly has a lot of love for her grandson, and she wants to try her best to bond with her, at times, self-absorbed daughter. But, she can only do so much. Then you have Martin Dysart. He was pretty good in his small role as Abe, Rocky's grandfather and Rusty's father. He's, a well-to-do rich guy. Doesn't seem to approve too much of his daughter hanging around with these ragtag biker bums. He's from the old school. But still, he's got a strong bond with Rocky because of their fascination for collecting baseball cards, old and new. They love the Dodgers, and he loves to go to the Dodgers game and have a good time. And that's a good thing, And he's trying his best to stay, in a level-headed demeanor, Let's see, Laura Dern as Diana Adams. By God, she is truly, she's still quite good looking even today at 50 years old. Laura Dern has not aged a bit. In this movie, she is a teenager. She's only about maybe 18, 19 years old. She still hasn't changed at all. She still looks good for her age. Back then, My God, she was pretty. And she played off a very sweet performance, too. I just really, really dug her character very well. She was just dynamic. Oh my goodness. It's just that I felt bad for her. I felt bad for Rocky that they had to end up ending their relationship like the way it did. It's just too bad that her parents did not want her to go anywhere near him, and that they were enrolling her in some private school, and she can't go with her. And this is kind of like a lot of where the tragedy in this movie that hits me the most. Then you have Dennis Burkley. I guess in some ways he provides a little bit of comic relief as Dozer. You know, he's part of this biker gang. Dozer is kind of a guy with a speech impediment, doesn't say very much, but every time Dozer comes on, I mean, he may not be what you would call academic, but the guy has heart. I mean, he and Rocky could almost be like brothers, even though Rocky actually had a brother in real life, and even his story too was kind of tragic because he also died at a young age as well, at the age of 32 from AIDS. But yeah, Rocky and Dozer kind of played off as almost like they were brothers. And I loved the scene where when Rocky was graduated and had all these academic achievements, Dozer broke his silence, saying, I'm not going to impersonate him, but I'm proud of you. Even though he said it in a slow, stuttering, stammering way, that scene was like, make me just want to say that's very nice of you to say that, Dozer. I could not have said it better myself. Then you have Lawrence Monoson as Ben. Ben was described by many. I mean, many people might say that he was a bit of a bastard when he decided to cancel his plans to go to Europe with Rocky. But I'm not going to condemn him too much. Throughout most of the movie, he and Rocky were like buddy buddies. They were best of friends. And I really truly dug his performance. Yes, I know it was a shame that he went back to Michigan and wasn't coming back. And that kind of broke Rocky's heart, and that's where he like said, called him stupid. But then again, like I said, sometimes the things that you always want don't always come your way. Let's see. Rounding off the cast, we had, I guess you could say, I will put down Kelly Jo Minter. She plays the part of the prostitute named Lori, whom Rusty hired so that Rocky could engage in some kind of intercourse. But she didn't like come across as being, all slutty. She was, of course, curious about his deformity. And instead of, engaging in intercourse, they decided to just hang out with the money that Rusty paid for. They decided to just hang out, go to a restaurant, go to a burger joint or something. Uh, engage in a little chit chat, small talk, or something like that. And then you got Ben Piazza, who plays the school principal, Mr. Sims. At first, he didn't seem to think that Rocky would fit in, but as it turns out, Rocky fit in much more than he even expected. And he was also responsible for sending him to camp to work as a counselor's aide for the blind children. So, at first you think the guy was a jerk, but then in this particular scene where he interacts with Rocky, we realize he's not so bad after all. So this movie really truly was a character driven, emotional tearjerker of a movie, and I couldn't recommend it enough. This movie really puts a lot of heart into it. It's emotional, it's sad, but at the same time, there are some feel good moments. To live every life, every day as it counts. Because as the days count, instead of just letting yourself drift by, make every day a special day. Just like what Rocky Dennis did. He is truly an inspirational character. This movie is very, very inspirational for people to watch. And if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I give Mask a 9.5. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Kurt Ryder saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.